Okay, should we start? Let's do it. Hi everyone, welcome to the Prometheus deep dive session, which is really, just a group of Prometheus maintainers on stage answering your questions. We don't have any other programs, so if that's not what you were looking for, now's the chance to leave. But basically, the idea was really just, we have so many Prometheus people at this conference. It's probably outside of PromCon, which is the actual Prometheus conference, the biggest gathering of all of us I've ever seen. So that's really cool. And I just thought maybe that's a good opportunity for people to ask random questions about the project's direction, the community, about technical things to us. And then hopefully we'll find someone who's the most qualified to answer that. But if you have to ask questions, please try to ask questions that are not like, oh, I've had this really weird, strange error on Docker with Prometheus, then it didn't connect to this port, because they're not useful. Like, try to ask questions that are that don't go into too much depth and that are like potentially interesting to other people than yourself in the room. And the way we have to do it, because it would take a long time to actually pass around the mic, is that if you feel okay just yelling out the question and then we can summarize it and then answer it, that should work in this size of room. If you feel like you would really need the microphone, we can also run there with you too. But yeah, that's basically the idea. Just as an intro, I'm Julius. I'm one of the initial 2 creators of Prometheus back then. Nowadays, I freelance completely independently, helping companies use Prometheus. Then we have Matt Layer here. He works for DigitalOcean. Tom Wilkie, Grafana Labs. Richard Hartmann, SpaceNet, one of the oldest German internet ISPs. That's always what you say, right? Yeah. Brian Brezel, Robust Perception, a Prometheus consulting company. We have Max Inden, now Red Hat, formerly CoreOS. Same for Fredrik Brunchik. Then we have Fabian, who just freshly joined Google. He was on stage yesterday. We have Ben Kochi, he's at GitLab. And we have Gautam B over there, he just joined Grafana Labs as well. So yeah, all active maintainers or / contributors to the project. Yeah.
That's one thing I like to point out is that the Prometheus team, we don't have a company, it's just the project, and all of us work for a whole bunch of different places, so yeah, it really contributes to the openness of the project.
It's also a challenge because we're one of the few CNCF projects who were not started by a company in order to start an open source infrastructure project. We kind of just created Prometheus because we felt we really needed it to do our job at SoundCloud, but SoundCloud was not interested in it. Not initially, at least, And so we don't really have the one Prometheus company or so, which is a good thing in terms of independence, but also means we don't have as many full-time staff and community members working on it, getting paid by companies. Google has many companies, for example, many people working on Kubernetes, and so does Red Hat and other companies. So yeah, that's also sometimes a challenge. But yeah, that's kind of what sets us apart there a bit. Cool, and I think there's one question already there, and then we'll go to you afterwards.
Customers need storages for around a year, 2 years, 7 years, depending on the government settings. The question is, why isn't it so difficult? Why is it difficult to get the long-term storage?
It's not.
It's not now.
So okay, depends what you mean with difficult. So in Prometheus itself, we decided not to integrate long-term storage because we want to keep Prometheus relatively simple, single node kind of setups. We do have, you're probably aware of the remote write integrations and several backends existing for that. Are those too difficult to use currently, or are they not working well enough, or?
The problem is you want to have one tool and not 7 tools to maintain.
You don't want to have 2 systems to maintain.
It's not always 2 systems. You need
Yeah.
to access this long-term system also. You need another access tool, not Prometheus. So if it starts to grow and grow and grow, and I have one tool, Prometheus, and I want to maintain everything over this.
Okay, so the question is, how do we do long-term storage while only having one kind of system to deal with? This. Yeah, a non-standard answer to this question. Do you want to?
I think it's fair to split this between like two of us, right?
Yeah, I think Fabian might want to say something about Thanos as well.
So there's a bunch of systems accepting this long-term storage remote API. One of them is Cortex, which I work on, and the other one's Thanos, which Fabian can talk about in a sec. Cortex is too hard for you to run on your own. So generally it's mainly aimed at SaaS vendors who want to sell you storage, which is why I work for Grafana Labs. But it's, it's kind of cool.
Just mentioning as well, you can access everything via Prometheus using the remote read. That's why it exists.
But nobody's using it. No, I think like one thing we see with Cortex and Thanos is that it's very different approaches, solving the same problem in a way, but catering to different use cases. So, like if we had some canonical answer in Prometheus, probably someone would get lost along the way. And Thanos, for example, is a different approach. It doesn't use the remote APIs. Instead, you have a sidecar that you basically then use to cluster up together multiple Prometheus servers. And then you have sort of horizontally scalable and stateless query layer. And then can do long-term storage based on object storage, which is entirely based on the new storage format we have as of Prometheus 2. So that's a very different approach that probably works much better for on-prem. And then the question is like, what is Prometheus, right? The query language is kind of, you can have this elsewhere. Cortex has it, Thanos has it, and it's kind of the same system you access, right? If you have the same query language, you probably don't care too much from a user perspective, like where this data is coming from. And then there's the operational perspective. And that's why Thanos is relatively simple. It's not the same, but it's relatively close. So if we had sort of some Prometheus built-in tool, it would also have some additional complexities in terms of operations. So whether it has a different name or not, that's probably not playing too much of a role in the end.
Yeah, the primary goal of Prometheus itself has always been to have highly available alerting and everything else coming second. So that already informs kind of the no clustering decision and so on. So yeah, you have to kind of focus on something, but then, yeah.
Yeah, another reason that we specifically don't have clustering in Prometheus is we wanted to make the ability to deploy it and the ability to adopt it as easy as possible. And if we put clustering into Prometheus, it would make it much harder for new developers to adopt it and start using it and just getting it tried out to see if it would actually fit for them. So by making clustering and external storage an optional feature with Thanos or Cortex or whatever other database you want to send your data to, it allows the users with more complex problems that probably already have a better idea on how they want to do it. Whereas if you're just a small group and you only have one Prometheus and you only really need 2 weeks of data, it's fine to do it that way. Even Prometheus itself is totally fine storing 6 months or a year of data internally. And that's, at GitLab, we started out simple. We started out with one Prometheus server and we just store 6 months of data in there. It's totally fine. As we grow and as our needs grow in complexity, we can add the Thanos complexity afterwards, and we don't have to. It allows people to not have to jump into the deep end right away with clustering and crazy configurations.
Next question, or do you want to? Okay, one last thing to that.
Yeah. In our main instance, without any magic, just with proper procedures, the oldest data we have is from end of 2015, and they're still active, and we still query stuff which goes all the way back. So it's actually doable. You just have to take care. Also, there's more free seats up front, so just come up.
There's one here. There's one here.
We don't bite. Next question. Oh, okay, bad timing.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, there was one there already, yeah.
I've bugged a few of you already on the panel, and you mentioned where you work. I was wondering if you could each talk about what your contribution is or where you see it going, just so we have an idea of what you do and what we can ask you about.
I think that's actually a good idea, no? What do you think? Sure. Yeah. Don't take too much time, but yeah.
So I'm Matt. I primarily work on the node exporter and the APROCFS library. I kind of like digging around with like system calls and Linux interfaces, so that's my big contribution to Prometheus itself.
I'm Tom. As I mentioned, I started working on Cortex, which is this Prometheus compatible thing. and then contributed a bunch to the remote APIs.
Richard, mainly community, doing PromCon and stuff, and also making sure that it's not only cloud native, but also brownfield.
The other list is shorter. So I work on a lot of stuff, like I maintain the Java and Python clients, the SNMP exporter, the black box exporter. Which don't take too much work, thankfully, and fair chunks of Prometheus as well.
Oh yeah, you just wrote a book?
Yes.
By writing?
That's not, Prometheus Up and Running is a personal project and not endorsed by the Prometheus team. So we always have to be careful because we are, as Ben mentioned, a project without any one company backing it. We have to be careful about who we do and don't endorse, just so we can keep ourselves open. Even if it would be nice for my business, but you know, I do believe in trying to keep church and state reasonably separate.
I read the book. I recommend it. No.
Hello, I'm Max. Mostly alert manager, maintenance, and then next to that, Kubernetes integration with the Prometheus Operator, which is also not part of this project, but part of CoreOS or Red Hat.
Yeah, I'm Fredrik. I also work on the Prometheus Operator, and basically everything connecting Kubernetes and Prometheus. So I work on the kube state metrics exporter or the Kubernetes service discovery. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've touched most of Prometheus and most of Alert Manager. Started off this new time series database a while ago, then worked on the operator initially. Yeah, and most recently, I guess, Thanos.
Yeah, I'm Ben. I mostly work on exporters and integrations and some community stuff around integrations. So like trying to encourage projects to adopt Prometheus metrics format, not for Prometheus, but just because it's a good way to integrate with other systems. So I tell people, I don't care if you implement Prometheus metrics for Prometheus, because somebody could use the Prometheus metrics with InfluxDB or any of our competitors. We want to get a good standard data format for getting data out of apps.
I work on the storage engine that Fabian started, the current 2.0 storage engine, and also upstream Prometheus.
Or maybe me as the last one. So in the past, I used to also touch pretty much almost everything in Prometheus in some way. I organized the last 2 years of PromCon as well, the Prometheus conference. Now that I'm freelancing around it, I'm doing more like what companies need, which sometimes is upstream work, but more often than not is just something internal. So yeah, if you need any, if you want to sponsor upstream development, talk to me. Okay, next question. Yep.
Yes, I don't use Prometheus, but I'm sort of curious about how other people manage the alerting configuration. Do they, have you got like APIs to change configuration on the fly, or is it rolling new config files, or how does that work?
Yeah. So the question is, how do people manage their alerting configuration? Are there APIs to change things, or are there only config files?
So I work for GitLab, and I do some of the management of GitLab's alerting. Of course, I teach the production engineering team how to make their own alerts, but we do everything. We just have a Git repo, and we check in our changes into the Git repo, and it's auto-deployed into our production environment. So it's just check it in, wait for it to get pushed.
Important. Oh,
yeah. GitLab.com /GitLab-com/runbooks. Yeah, it's under the GitLab com project, and we actually, it's nice because we put all of our recording rules and alerts in the same repo as our runbook. So if we change an alert, we can update the runbook at the same time.
Yeah, and it's maybe important to say there is no API in Prometheus itself to update a file on disk, because we want to have one path of configuration to enter Prometheus, and not like Prometheus modifies a file on disk, but then it might also get overwritten again by a config management system or so, right? So that's why everything comes through the file, and if you want to make changes to that, you have to build your own API that changes that file somehow.
Notices the files change and reloads?
Yes, you can send a SIG hub to Prometheus and make sure that it picks up the new config. Yeah.
And I'll put a quick plug in for my talk if that's all right.
Sure.
Yeah,
I've
been working with Fredrik on a new way of kind of expressing alerts to make them agnostic to how you label things in your infrastructure, which hopefully should make them more redistributable and collaborative. So Fredrik and I have published a set of like Kubernetes alerts and dashboards and recording rules, and we're calling them mix-ins, and we're talking about it tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
There was a question back there.
Is there a question back there?
I was just going to say, Ben, did you really make an hour ago to get that comment?
Yeah. Yes, I updated some metrics and I forgot to update a recording rule, so I had to check in a change to the runbooks to fix a recording rule that was broken and not recording our quantile data for Rails requests. Do you want to talk about PromCon?
PromCon. Oh yeah, we have PromCon coming up again in August. It's the 3rd installment, this time organized by Richard, last 2 years by me as the main kind of person. It's the Prometheus conference. We'll have maintainers there, but also we want to solicit talks from users of Prometheus to share their experience, how you're using Prometheus, what you've learned, best practices. The CFP is still open, I think, until May 14. PromCon.io, you'll find it there. Submit talks, buy tickets. The registration is open as well at the moment, and it's in Munich again, which is a lovely city to visit in August.
And just in terms of talks, we aren't just interested in us lecturing everyone. We would like user stories, people using it in different ways, like a good diversity of talks and attendees. Because like last year, only like a third of the talks were by us. And we want to keep it that way, whereas we're not dominating. It's actually a community event organized by, well, Richie mostly.
Yep.
So if you know anybody, if not you, if you know somebody else who would be interested in talking about monitoring or any of the related topics, let them know. We're still looking for more speakers.
It's also a kind of cozy event, 220 people, so it feels familiar in a way, around this size. Yeah.
So actually we're hitting the scaling issues now, and our question more about the current architecture. We're running one Prometheus, and it's great, like 10, 15 Kubernetes clusters, and we're hitting the issues with RAM because we're running VM on AWS. 16 gigabytes of memory, and we always do this. So yeah, the question is, we're thinking about different architecture, but the question more in this kind of architecture, is it possible to decrease the time series that is stored, or some other improvements that we can do, like retention period, and etc.
So the question is, there's one Prometheus monitoring multiple Kubernetes clusters. It hits the RAM limit on a single machine. What can be done to scale it better?
So as currently implemented, what really matters is the size of the head block in terms of RAM, and there's not much you can do with that.
The head block is the last 2 hours of time series, roughly in memory.
I do have a pull request out, because that RAM is small. The amount of RAM PromQL uses is not. I have a pull request out which will massively decrease it. And then for questions of Kubernetes architecture, we'll go to Fredrik.
Okay, so in terms of being able to horizontally scale, I don't think this is actually very Kubernetes specific, but there is a possibility to shard Prometheus with a hash mod function. That's like a relabeling rule in Prometheus, and then that way you can distribute the targets among multiple instances of Prometheus. If that's really what you need, but what you could also do in terms of, because you said that you're scraping 15 clusters, you could also adopt Thanos, for example, where you then have a Prometheus server per cluster. I don't know if that actually makes sense. It depends a bit on how large each individual cluster is. But with Thanos, you could then globally query all of those and make it look like one, but decrease the the memory overhead.
Yeah. So part of the original, like where Prometheus came from, it was designed with the idea that a Prometheus server should be small, it should be attached to the thing that it's monitoring. So if you have 15 Kubernetes clusters, you really want to have 15 Prometheus servers, one for each cluster, and then you can use one of any of our techniques, whether it's Cortex, Thanos, Federation, to pull in a global view. But then you get the data from the Prometheus cluster. Because what if you delete a Kubernetes cluster? Well, you have to think about the multi-tenancy problem there, where you have, if you want to delete that cluster, if you have a Prometheus server for that cluster, you just delete the Prometheus server for that cluster, and you don't have to go back and like clean up data in a big global Prometheus server. So, like for GitLab, when we're starting to ship Prometheus servers on a per namespace. So every application gets deployed to a namespace. We deploy a single Prometheus server into that namespace just for that app. And then if you delete that app, you delete the namespace, and then your Prometheus server is gone, and then the cleanup is super easy.
What if you want to keep the data?
Thanos.
Yeah.
Or Cortex.
I mean, obviously, it's trade-offs. Like if you have data spread over many Prometheus servers, then you cannot craft one PromQL query that touches all of the data. But yeah, the classical way of using Prometheus would be really like one Prometheus per cluster, and then you have a global one that federates, and it doesn't have all the details anymore, but it would have the global view, just the aggregations of each cluster.
And maybe a quick question: the short-term curve for this use case with one is like retention period.
If you're having RAM issues, then fewer queries and fewer time series especially. Like the number of concurrently active time series that your Prometheus is managing, scraping, that's probably incurring the most memory cost. So theoretically, for example, you could say you're not so interested in some of the metrics, like either you drop entire types of targets or put them in a different Prometheus server, or as a last resort, there's metrics relabeling. There's a facility in the configuration file, where you can say like, drop all the metrics that match a certain pattern, don't even store them.
Yeah.
We have a lot of unused metrics. Maybe one more question, sorry.
Last one.
The different memory footprint for like cases when it tries to fix corrupted TST B, because we saw the issues after it hits the limit, the TST B corrupted, and it cannot, and it's starting and just linearly increasing the memory.
So there's a question about TST B corruption and how that affects memory limits. So you actually had a case of where your TST B itself became corrupted.
Yeah, because all
because Prometheus crashed because of the OOM, and then it came up. That shouldn't really corrupt it, but probably there was a bug. Do you know more details about this?
So did you see a log message like TST B corrupted? And
maybe that gets into too much detail now. Let's take that one offline because it maybe goes into too much. Like, is this a bug? What kind of bug? Yep. He was next. Okay. Okay, you go.
So I guess this is kind of like a best practices question, but we're in a position where running Prometheus per namespace, as mentioned, across like 6 clusters, and a lot of the instances are still running 1.8. I just was curious to, and this is I guess aimed toward the operator team here. What are best practices for migrating from 1.8 to 2.0 without any loss of, let's say, a 30-day window of data retention between all the namespaces?
I mean, ultimately, there is
Repeat the question, please.
Oh yeah, the question was how do you migrate between 1.8 and 2.0 without having sort of big data loss window? I think we have a migration tool by GitLab, right? Yeah, but it's kind of slowish, I think.
It's a little, So we for GitLab we paid Julius to develop an actual upgrade tool that will take the old time series database and create the new time series database. But of course, it uses a bit of memory and it takes a long time, and currently the way it works is you have to do it all offline. So during the offline window, you're not collecting any metrics. So really my answer to this is just deploy a new Prometheus server, wait 30 days and throw away the old one.
Yeah, the problem why it's slow is just the old time series database to read like hundreds of gigabytes of structured time series data just is slow. So it's hard to get really around that. Yeah.
Just a small follow-up. Is there right now, or is there any plan to add support for deploying Thanos on top of the Prometheus Operator instances?
Repeat the question.
So just last week we released a version of the Prometheus Operator that has all the requirements for Thanos merged. So I think Thanos needs external labels on a Prometheus server in order to discover its identity and potentially do some optimizations for queries. So that's down, and you can also now inject arbitrary containers next to your Prometheus server through the Prometheus Operator, which means you can inject the Thanos sidecar necessary to do this. And we actually have some example manifests in the Prometheus Operator repository as well. I think it's in contrib kubeprometheus experimental. You can check that out.
There's a question. That was first.
I have a couple of questions. First is, could you please express a little bit more what the Thanos is and what it brings? And another question is, currently the Prometheus is very good for analyzing, like, for alerting or whatever, but sometimes you need to have some sort of, anomaly detection libraries, or, I don't know, like nonlinear predictions or whatever. It's like use like ML stuff. And currently the only way to do that is use remote API and send this to some ML engines. But do you have plans to extend these function libraries to more kind of statistics and some sort of ML function, ML functions or something like that?
Cool. Okay, yeah, let's keep maybe two questions first. So first one is, what is Thanos? Why is this awesome? Second one was, are we planning on adding more ML kind of machine learning type functionality to Prometheus itself? By the way, so you could use the remote APIs currently, but you can also query Prometheus and get it out that way, right? But yeah.
Yeah, let's start off with Thanos. So Thanos essentially tries to solve a few problems that you might encounter when you try to scale out Prometheus. First is, you may end up with multiple Prometheus servers, and now you want to ask a query across the data of all of them. And what you have to do currently essentially is you have to use federation. So you have to decide a certain subset of metrics that you then federate to another server that then has sort of a global view. But you will never be able to access all of the data at once. So that's something Thanos solves. The other part is that if you have an HAPI of Prometheus servers, you might at some point have gaps in one of them. And then depending on which one you hit, you see different data with a gap somewhere or not. And there's really no way to query both and sort of get back a unified result that just shows you a graph without gaps. And then I guess finally, like long-term storage. So Thanos essentially tries to solve them all. The simple path is you deploy a sidecar next to Prometheus, which then will sort of cluster together with other sidecars. And then you have a horizontally scalable stateless query layer, which essentially just implements the Prometheus API and PromQL. And this query layer then clusters together with all these sidecars and then sort of fans out queries to all these servers. And then you have basically one entry point for all your queries that can hit all servers at once. And it's trying to be smart about it. So if your sort of label selection in your query can exclude certain Prometheus servers, it will just not go to them. So it's sort of functional query routing in a way.
It's open source.
It's open source. And it also detects when two Prometheus servers are sort of HA pairs, are collecting the same data, and it will then apply some heuristics to merge this data back together.
So it's durability, scalability, merging of data between different servers and HA pairs. It solves all these problems, and it integrates with your existing Prometheus setup where you might have many servers and you just want to kind of get an integrated long-term view over everything.
Yeah, so
maybe interesting to note that Cloudflare is deploying it in a large scale.
Cloudflare is apparently testing it very heavily, at least. Fastly is very interested.
Improbable.
Yeah.
GitLab as well? Oh, GitLab is interested? Okay, so yeah. it has interest behind it, so yeah. That's a good sign.
And the good thing is you can kind of do a gradual rollout. So the simple path is you just use the sidecar and the query layer. That's all read-only, so you cannot really break anything. It's just stateless stuff that you deploy essentially. And then if you want to sort of extend this and have long-term storage, you can have the sidecars update the database files as they're written to disk to an object storage, which can be Google Cloud Storage, S3 or something. And that's, so yeah. Ceph, whatever. And that's kind of like a simple backup strategy. And then if you actually want then to query these backups dynamically, you can deploy the Thanos sort of store gateway, which can really efficiently read data back from these object storage files, basically in real time. So it does like really sort of directed range queries against the object storage and consolidates these range requests together, so that you basically almost get like real-time response times, even though your data is like really cheaply stored in object storage. And lastly, what we added as well was downsampling, simply because the computation gets at some point really expensive if you have like really long data, sort of date ranges that you are querying. And it doesn't have to do with like query speed, just this query processing. So we added downsampling, and they can actually query like 10 years of data in a reasonable amount of time.
Cool. Who wants to answer the second question? Brian, maybe?
So the first thing we need to be careful about is the word anomaly detection, because it is largely a marketing term. Now, you're using it in the way it's actual anomaly detection. Some other products and whatnot, it'll just mean, oh, we have an alert if the JVM is spending a lot of time in garbage collection, which is, it is technically an anomaly, but ML is what people really mean. So just look out for that one. So the thing is that using any form of LML on, at least my experience, on anything bar toy examples is extremely difficult. And someone actually works at Google, and like one of the machine learning teams said, yep, it takes 18 months basically to come up with a model that you can use for something. So if you spend 18 months, you can come up with a model for a single alert and spend your 3 or 4 engineers doing that. Simple static thresholds work really well. You know, and just that kind of trade-off. There's also the question of inside Prometheus, how heavily do you want to get into stats? It's my personal belief that, you know, Holt Winters is already slightly over the line, and that's largely because you don't actually have Holt Winters. You've got double exponential rather than triple. So there's a limit of how much CPU we're going to manage and how much history you need. Like if Prometheus only nominally has 3 months of data, is that enough to do this all? And we don't have the CPU to keep things reliable, but you can do that externally. There are, however, I know that FreshTracks are investigating the ML stuff for Prometheus and integrating it there, so they'll have some, I don't know where there's commercial or open source option there at some point. But I would see it as generally this is something you do outside of Prometheus and then use that to inform thresholds. And then you can feed the data back in via remote read or something if you want. Anyone else have a check?
So let me just look at the time. We have 3 more minutes, so maybe one more question. Who was first of all of these? You? Okay. Repeat the question.
So the question is how do you manage the resource usage of these Prometheus servers?
Per namespace ones. Per
namespace Prometheus servers. That's a good question. We don't actually have a very good plan for this yet. So it's just basically like Prometheus, the Prometheus 2.0 server model is, it uses what it needs to scrape. So you can kind of guess based on how many metrics. Like there's kind of a rule of thumb of like 8 kilobytes of memory per metric that it's collecting simultaneously in memory. So you kind of get like how much data you're collecting informs your scale. So
you set like static limits for that? Or
yeah. Or just leave it unlimited and set a reserve. In Kubernetes, you would just set a request but not a limit. Because you don't want to you want to avoid the Prometheus server because you'll corrupt your data, or you won't corrupt the data, but you'll lose data.
Do you guys have a community, like how it works? How many meetings, daily meetings, weekly meetings? How to join?
Yeah. So.
Similar to Kubernetes.
Yeah. So we have a monthly meeting? Yeah, we have a monthly team meeting. It's not currently.
It's not open enough.
Yeah, like it's not currently open. Once people start, basically like when we see somebody who's contributing quite a lot and they seem interested, we have a process in our governance to invite them to become a team member, and then they're invited to join the meeting.
I think it would be cool in general to have everything open. I think at the moment the one blocker there is that we sometimes discuss like things like sponsorship for a conference, or things that shouldn't, details that shouldn't leak out to the entire world. I like the way Prometheus, Kubernetes is doing it, but they also have like professional resources behind it, which we don't quite yet have. But I think this is an area where we should really improve. Yeah. I think we have to wrap it up. Unfortunately, it's 35. Or do we have one more question? Okay, you were kind of so sad when you had. Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah. If you integrate to an already existing organization where, for example, they use Cinder and they have all this logic in the application. Can I answer that one, or do you want to? Okay. Oh well, he's also doing it. Do you want to go first, or should I go first?
Yeah, sure. So we also
repeat the question.
The question was basically if there's any plans or any support for integrating with different monitoring solutions. Something we saw is that a few companies actually started supporting Prometheus stuff. This is kind of a hot political topic because if you're actually building and selling a product and all of a sudden you're plastering a different name all across your own product, this might not come across too well. So what we actually did is there's an effort called Open Metrics, which actually splits out this standard into its own thing. To actually get neutral vendor support. It's in the planning that we also have an RFC, so you can just point your vendor at RFC 123 and please support this. And once they accept the tender and don't check the RFCs, they are legally obliged to support Prometheus and all the other ingesters and exporters which you might have.
Can I just say, like, we have a ton of ways in which we do integrate with other monitoring servers and in the way getting metrics out of existing systems into Prometheus, getting Prometheus metrics, alerting in Nagios on Prometheus metrics, sending Prometheus metrics to a different long-term storage. Like we integrate pretty much in any way you can imagine, because all these integration points are open. So there's sections in our docs, there's 2 integration sections, one about general exporters and other monitoring systems and so on, and then there's also one about existing software that has Prometheus metrics instrumentation. So definitely have a look at that.
Yeah, like for example, the Nagios Isinga, we already have a script called check Prometheus, so that you can just put a check Prometheus into your Nagios or Isinga install.
At SoundCloud, this is what we had to do at the beginning because
we didn't have an alert manager. Yeah. Before the alert manager, we used Nagios to alert on Prometheus data.
Yeah. I think we have to really wrap it up.
Yep. There's also the NRP exporter to go the other way. Stickers. Get your stickers.
Yeah, we can still take questions in the hall. So thank you all for coming.